Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphanlast, aka Skylar Madison, and last time in the 51 animation challenges, you saw me working on this animation right here. Shortly after posting this online, a more experienced animator gave me a critique that I really appreciated, but ultimately it got me to think I need to rework this entire animation. The only things that I kept from the content of the last video were the keyframes. I don't feel as though my last video was some sort of complete and total failure, because I feel as though mistakes are par for the course while you're learning animation. And also because I feel as though people are mainly subscribed to me to learn how to use OpenToons, not how to animate. And I feel I did a good job teaching how to use Shift and Trace, except you access it through the View menu and not the Level menu. My editing software makes it difficult for me to make things out sometimes, so sometimes I say the wrong thing, and I'm really sorry about that. Now, I feel it's important to take the advice of those that have more experience and listen to what they have to say, and this video is mainly focused on that. Refining things, refining the craft. First off, let me show you a few things. So, one of the things that I discussed with this guy giving the critique was the differences from drawing your curves frame by frame versus drawing your curves globally. Drawing out your arcs or curves frame by frame helps you in the actual animation process. It makes sure that things are lining up and working together frame by frame. Drawing your arcs or your curves globally helps you in fixing any of the details such as the nose, ear, or eye, making sure that they don't jitter about the animation for the full duration of the animation. So what I'm calling global arcs are a good way to double check your work after you're done with the initial portion of the rough animation. You draw out your global arcs at that point most especially, and you adjust your rough animation accordingly to the global arcs. I've found in my personal use of the global arcs, it's not always going to work out for you if you try to animate to your global arcs, and this is because you're dealing with a lot of shifting geometry in your animation and it can throw you off. So here I'm showing some of the problems with the content of my last video by drawing out some global arcs. I start with a global arc for the eyebrow and slowly go frame by frame to show just one of the problems with this animation. Notice how the eyebrow just dances around the arc. It only sometimes follows it, and that's not what you want to see. So I go ahead and open up where I currently am on this animation, and I did a number of experiments, such as trying to clean up my line work with rasters. I think this was a mistake. I still think that cleaning up your animation with vectors is a far superior process, because after you draw out a line, it's still very customizable. You don't need to mess around with erasing and redrawing areas. Even if you're planning on converting the vector line work into rasters later on, I still recommend doing the actual cleanup line work with vectors. I think that after that little raster cleanup experiment, I'll wind up cleaning up this animation once again, only with vectors, just because I'm not happy with the raster cleanup results. Just look at the shape of his head. It's so wonky from one frame to the next, and it's because of the raster cleanup process that I undertook. Though it looks fine, I'm not looking for fine, I'm looking for good. But this version of the animation isn't beyond saving. It's within the realm of quality. So I go ahead and draw out some global arcs and judge the animation of this more refined version. And though I feel this animation is better, I do feel as though I should have judged this animation better with global arcs before I transitioned into the cleanup process of the animation. But that's fine, because since I'm still planning on revisiting the cleanup process again with vectors, I still kind of consider myself in the cleanup stage. I have a problem with the ears and nose, but I'm happy with most of the animation. Even most of the animation with the ears and nose. I just need a little bit of refinement there. I'm especially happy with the positioning and the volumes of the eyebrows and eyes. So the rest of this video will be me showcasing the steps I took to make a better animation, and some of the weird, harebrained experiments that I've undergone. Some of this is me just running through a lot of experimentation to find what works and what doesn't work. So right here, I've been just looking through the animation, seeing where there's problems, and seeing what I could save and what I think needed to be done with. And ultimately, I felt as though I needed to start all over again and just keep the keyframe images from the last video. I had a bit of confusion about the placement of the ears, and had to record myself on my smartphone a little bit to understand how the ears move to the tilting of the head. By and large, the ears don't do much up and down movement, not too much. It's more the angle of the ears that shift because they're rather close to the neck. And so, since they're so close to the neck, they're next to the fulcrum of the movement. Some of this confusion was caused because I was trying to animate with global arcs initially, and I didn't know the purpose of the global arcs. You can still use them while in the roughing stage, like while you're still animating, to just kind of scrub through your animation here and there. But by and large, I'm finding that frame by frame arcs are what is primarily used when you're roughing things out. The global arcs is just to correct any errors along the way. Right here I try to animate with what's called the Riley abstraction, and I've found that in my attempts to animate with it, it was just too much to keep track of, and hardly any of the Riley abstraction would even wind up being seen in the final result. I actually talked to Reddit about this, and he said it would be overkill, and that I already had enough drawing capability to know where the placement of each element of the face should go. I also did this weird experiment with roughing out the eyes with these big black circles. This was kind of stupid, but the idea was that I'd try out drawing out the entire eyeball and then refine the eye in there, just with the eyelids and everything. But that's what the early stage of animating is for, I think. You should be allowed to experiment a little bit, even if this means settling with what everyone else has been doing for forever. Who knows, you just might be able to find a technique that's unique to you and actually works. At this point, I do away with the Riley abstraction, except for about 1.5 of the things, because I felt that there were a few good references to keep in mind, and because it might give me a few good ideas when it came to putting on the shadows and highlights. If you decide to use the Riley abstraction, use a very, very simplified version of it. That's my opinion, at least, for whatever good it's worth. At this stage, I wasn't so much interested in drawing out a bunch of details. I was just mainly interested in getting my construction lines down. But at this point, I did a second pass at the rough, which ultimately was sort of a waste of time. I should have kept everything on the same level and should have just focused on drawing only the construction lines rather than trying to draw big black eyeballs and sketching out a rough idea of the nose. Last week I promised teaching how to draw out shadows for the Noble Frugal Studio collaboration. I was thinking about including that in the curvilinear perspective playlist, and I think I might be able to still do that this week, but all of my time has been spent on this animation right here. I spent an exhaustive amount of time on this animation, and I felt like it needed as much of my time as humanly possible to get it right. I already released and publicized a screw-up. I I need to make sure that I can learn from my mistakes and show others that if I get something wrong, I can fix it. And so I've invested an extra amount of time to show that I can narrow this down and that I can get it looking good. I also stated that I'd try to get 2 OpenTunes videos out this week, and since all of my time was spent working on this video, I'll try to get that done next week. I'm sorry about announcing things and not being able to do them. I'm sort of trying to bounce ideas off of you guys and get your opinions, but it's all slow going. I'm really I got a lot of work that I have to do throughout the week, and once again, I don't think I'll be able to get any sleep this weekend to try to get you guys more than just one video for this week. I still didn't follow Reddit's advice very well. Sometimes it takes days for information to actually sink in. He said that you should basically do something like draw out something like the nose first, and then see what it looks like for the full duration of the animation. Draw it out for the full duration of the animation, and then draw an eye, and then follow it for the full duration of the animation, and so on and so forth for each element of the face. This way, you're not working so linearly. And so, even though I've done a better animation than last time, I still didn't do it as suggested throughout the entire workflow process. I'll make sure to do a better job in that area and following the advice from this critique for my next animation project and so on and so forth from here on out. But this video was purely a learning process, but eventually I did wind up following that advice. So let me go ahead and read the critique that I got. The critique came from Reddit. That's his username on Reddit. And this is what he had to say.
Okay, I've seen a couple of these videos here, and I gotta say, the results aren't so good, and I think I know how you can improve. Basically, you spend way too long on each one single drawing, and you work too linear. Make sure to flip, just alternate quickly with your drawings every time you decide the placement of any element of the face. Flip while you're placing the details. Flip all the time. Basically, you move on to the next stage of the process way too early before having worked out a solid base. So you end up wasting a lot of time cleaning and coloring animations that have a rough that hasn't been fully worked out. As you animate, pick one detail of your character and follow it through, looking at all the frames one after another. They should all be moving on the same sort of curve, and you need to correct the placement of any of them that jumps. You basically need to keep building and creating all your drawings at the same time and not just do them independently one after the other. If you prefer working pose to pose instead of straight ahead, start with your first 2 main start and end poses and refine the crap out of them so all the volumes are kept. Stay rough, flip, so you don't feel attached to your drawings and don't care about moving lines or erasing them, but be precise so that when you add your breakdowns, then in betweens, you know exactly where everything needs to go. So your animation curves are smooth and the volumes consistent.
Here you see me using some global arcs on the eyes and eyebrows and adjusting a few things to make sure everything is lining up. I also start working on trying to clean up this animation with a raster level, just because I've never tried to clean up an animation with a raster level before. And since I'm not happy with this cleanup process, I'm just going to redo the cleanup with vectors in the next video in this series, so I can still treat this raster cleanup work that you see here in this video as though it's a rough animation. So throughout this entire video, I'm pretty much working on a rough animation. I can still adjust the placement of the ears and nose, refine a few of the drawings a bit, and get it looking really sharp before I go about cleaning it up. I decided to redraw the face for every single frame, even if the angle of the face would stay the same in relation to the camera. People call copying and pasting parts of an animation cheating, but I think they're full of crap. If copying and pasting renders just as good of a result as if you had drawn every single frame by hand, then there's no point in spending the extra time redrawing the same thing over and over again. If it renders the same result in less time, do the workflow that renders the same result in the least amount of time. Like I said, I did a really harebrained workflow in trying to work out this animation. And in trying to do the raster cleanup, it's only until after I had already gone through about 4 or 5 frames that Awkreddit's advice sunk in that I'm working too linearly. I need to just focus on one element of the face and work through the entire animation with it. I've got to say, trying to keep the volumes consistent, trying to keep the shapes consistent with shifting geometries is very difficult. It's an artistic challenge I've never had to focus on. And that pretty much concludes it for this video, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you didn't like it, please like, share, and subscribe anyways. Or leave a critique.